Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan, and on behalf of Book Soup, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for our virtual event with Mary Pauline Lowry, who is here to present her new novel, The Roxy Letters. We are excited and grateful that our bookstore can continue to bring authors and their works to our community during this uncertain time. We will be hosting more virtual events in the near future, and you can learn more about them on our website as well as our social media. Our next event is scheduled for next Tuesday night, May 5th at 6 p.m. It's with Brady Hames discussing his new novel, The Resolutions, and he'll be in conversation with Brad Listy. For regular updates on upcoming events, please feel free to subscribe to our email newsletter. This evening's virtual event will end with a Q&A. To submit a question, please use the Ask a Question button. It's at the bottom of your screen. If you see a question on that list that you like and you want to make sure that our speaker answers, just click like on that question and it'll elevate it up the list. We'll try to get to as many questions as time allows. Also, please consider supporting our bookstore and Mary Pauline by purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book. Just click on the green purchase button. It's also below us here, and that will direct the viewer to they'll redirect you to our website where you could get started on the checkout process. We are selling digital audiobooks through Libro.fm and Kobo ebooks as well. With that said, let me introduce our guest speaker for this evening. Born and raised in Austin, Texas, Mary Pauline Lowry is the author of the previous novel, Wildfire. She has an MA in English Creative Writing from the University of Texas and an MFA in Creative Writing from Boise State University. She's also a regular contributor to O Magazine. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the New York Times Magazine, The Millions, and other publications. And without further ado, I'm going to turn off my camera and turn everything over to Mary Pauline Lowry. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you, Book Soup. I just first want to say thank you so much, Book Soup, for hosting me. I'm really, really grateful to be here. And to everyone watching, thank you for coming out and supporting me. But also, I hope you all remember that now is really the time to support independent bookstores. They give so much to us and have always, and now is really the time for us to give back and support them. I've personally been buying stacks of books from my local indie, and they come drop them off at my house, and it's amazing because I have great books to read, and then it helps to guarantee, obviously, that they will be able to reopen when they're able to. So please support Book Soup by buying my novel, The Roxy Letters, but also buy several novels, order a book for a friend, because now is the time when that money will really go a long way. Okay, so I'm here to talk about my novel, The Roxy Letters, which was published by Simon & Schuster on April 7th. The book is set in Austin, Texas, which is my hometown, and it is written in letters from Roxy to her ex-boyfriend, Everett. Everett is living with her, failing to pay his rent on time, and just generally blocking her mojo. And I am going to change out my Roxy glasses. These were a gift to me from Francesca Block, who is one of my favorite authors. So I thought I would wear them, but I can see my reflection in them. So I'm going to try these other Roxy glasses. But anyway, Roxy is 28, and she is working in the deli of the flagship Whole Foods in Austin, Texas. Now, this is back in 2012, before the Amazon takeover of Whole Foods, when Whole Foods was still, though a huge company, it had started in Austin, and many Austinites still considered it to be sort of a local business. And Roxy is kind of artistically and sexually stymied. She's in a rut. She hasn't gotten over a breakup, and she really, really needs to get her groove back. She's upset about the ways that her hometown is growing and changing and becoming more corporatized, but she hasn't figured out what to do about it. But when her favorite indie video store, Waterloo Video, closes down and is replaced by a Lululemon, she decides it is time for her to take action. So she joins up with her two best friends, Artemis and Annie, and with the help of her favorite planetary deity, Venus, she kind of goes to war to see if she can oust this Lululemon and get it replaced by a worthy local business. The Washington Post I'm happy to say, called The Roxy Letters, just the kind of comic novel we need right now, which made me happy because I'm just really hoping that anyone who needs an escape, a retreat, needs to laugh, will find solace and a good time in this book. That is my hope. So I wanted to, maybe first, before I read a little bit, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my road to publication. I started writing seriously in June of 2000, and it took until now for me to get a book deal and publish a book with a major publishing company. And so it took like a lot of dedication, and I had to work through many years of rejection. And before the Roxy Letters, I had written a book that I spent 8 years on, and my agent was really excited about it, and she sent it out wide to all these editors, and no one bought it. And it was just a very sad, serious book. And so after that, I was very upset and depressed. And after the election of 2016, I was even more depressed. So I just really focused on reading comic novels, and then I started writing the Roxy Letters. So again, I'm hoping that, like, it cheered me up when I was writing it. I hope that it cheers a lot of y'all up as you're reading it. Right now, I'm going to read about 2 pages of the book. And this is a scene. So Roxy decides through a series of events that I won't go into because I don't want to spoil, but she decides she's going to go to a meeting of a sex cult. And so this is a scene. She gets to the sex cult, to the group meeting. It's like in a house with several people. And the first thing they do is like an intimacy building exercise. And so Roxy's sitting in a circle with all these people that she's just met, these like weirdos from the sex cult. And she's joining in on this intimacy building exercise with them. So I am just going to read a couple of pages from the book so you get a little sense of her voice. As we went around the circle, I did appreciate the opportunity to check out each person closely without seeming like I had a staring problem. There was Lisa, a sultry 30-something who was scared of dying alone. Kevin, a muscular thespian who was scared of never having his artistic talent recognized. "You stole my fear," I wanted to shout. Sharon, a striking woman with hair dyed so platinum blonde it looked like it might be possible to break the strands like matchsticks, who was afraid of never finding true love. Samantha, who in her early 40s would have been pretty if she hadn't paid to have her face shot full of Botox and fillers. "Let me guess," I wanted to say, "you're afraid of aging and losing your sexual power." Who said she was scared she and her daughter would never get along. An Australian guy named Mike, who was in his mid-50s and wore Coke bottle glasses, confessed his fear that he wouldn't get a green card. Beatrice, she had to second the emotion of Kevin's fear of never receiving recognition as an artist. Then everyone giggled, making it impossible for me to third that emotion. I felt a great, unexpected anger well up in me. I did not want to be able to relate to these people at all. I wanted my fears to be special and absolutely unique. As I was up next, and the very last to share my deepest fear, everyone in the group stared at me expectantly. The room went totally silent, and when I spoke, it was like a dam broke open inside me, and I flooded the room with angry words. "Lots of the very best artists are never recognized for their work," I said. Henry Darger was a hospital custodian. When he was alive, no one knew he was writing the story of the Vivian Girls. It was 15,000 pages long, with an additional several hundred painted illustrations. Or take James Hampton, another janitor. He spent 14 years building a gilded throne for Jesus' second coming. Sure, the throne of the third heaven of the nation's Millennium General Assembly is in the Smithsonian now. As a side note, I sometimes think Ignatius J. Reilly was right to call the Smithsonian that grab bag of our nation's refuge. An interesting argument in the case of the throne, which was constructed entirely of trash. And then Roxy continues, but in James Hampton's lifetime, no one knew he was even building the throne. And that lack of recognition isn't my fear. It's a petty fear, I said, staring hard first at Kevin and then at Beatrice. The fear of not being recognized is a petty fear because the artistic work done in anonymity is often the bravest and most worthy work. I was crying by that point. I don't know what had gotten into me. No, my fear is that I won't fucking do the work at all. I was sobbing. And Beatrice, who I'd just been really nasty to, kindly handed me a box of Kleenex. The rest of the group looked at me, nodding sympathetically, and finally Beatrice said, "Amazing work, Roxy." The other Omers kept nodding. A few looked at me with deep sympathy, and a couple muttered, "Glad you're here." Okay, so that's that for that excerpt. I want to read just one more excerpt. Let's see. Okay, so this is a one-page letter that Roxy is writing to her ex-boyfriend, Everett. And I'm going to read the whole letter just so you get a sense of the arc of some of them. July 10th, 2012. Dear Everett, I've been meaning to get this off my very sexy chest for a while. While I'm happy enough to have you living here, as long as you pay me rent, it's important for you to know once and for all that I will not be getting back together with you. So please stop making jokes about how great it will be when we finally realize we are meant for each other. And while I enjoy an occasional, "You look pretty," I feel the number of compliments you have been giving me recently exceeds that of a normal landlady room renter relationship. It's true that I'm eager to break the man fast that has followed in the wake of my being unceremoniously dumped by Brant Bitterbrush, and have been enjoying your company immensely, but I do not think it's a good idea for you and I to hook up again. The reason is not, as you claim, a difference in education or class, or that you don't have a traditional career or any career at all, nor is it because you have an unlikely and anachronistic passion for heavy metal, or even because when we were dating and I tried to take you out for drinks with my college pals, Yolanda, Rose, Kate, and Barkley, you always clammed up completely, morphing into what they perceived as a total dud. It's more that as a couple, we lack the kind of sexual chemistry we would need to sustain us through the vagaries of this world. Therefore, please take this letter as a heartening reminder that we are now platonic friends, and keep alive the hope that you will find someone who is a much better match for you than I. Officially, Roxy. P.S. I texted Artemis Starla and she has not texted me back. So that is all I'm going to read, and I'm going to open up the questions, and Dan, feel free to join us anytime. But my first question is, what has it been like to move from a real world to a virtual book tour? So I was all set to go on a 16-city book tour when this book came out, and a couple weeks before I was ready to leave, I realized that was not going to happen. And so of course I have to admit, I felt really sorry for myself for a couple weeks. And then I, with the help of some friends, really snapped out of it and thought, okay, now we have this new world order, and how can I have a book tour from my house? And so many awesome, amazing indies like Book Soup have hosted me, and that has been great. So I've been doing these live events, and it's been a wonderful way to meet booksellers and check in with independent bookstores. So that's been great. And then on Instagram, there are people that have these accounts that are called Bookstagram accounts, for those of y'all that don't know. And those are accounts where people just post about books. And it turns out it's a really strong and vibrant community. So a lot of Bookstagrammers have let me do takeovers of their stories where people ask me questions and I post videos. And I've just had a lot of fun trying to make those like wacky and entertaining, and, you know, have been making all these friends with Bookstagrammers, which is great, and going to their Zoom happy hours. And then I've also gotten to do like a tour of my bookshelves for Goodreads, and just had interviews with really fun people. So that has all been actually really fun, and it's really been a good lesson in moving quickly from self-pity into action and finding fun and joy where I can. And I talked to a friend the other night who was telling me that her parents, she said they're living their best COVID life, which means, you know, they're going for walks, they're cooking dinner together. And the way I interpreted that phrase is that, like, within the constraints of the situation that we're in now, like, how can we have the best possible day every day? For those of us who are not, you know, on the front lines, those of us whose job it is to stay home, to keep our community safe. Like, how can we live our best COVID life? And, you know, hopefully for a lot of us, that means buying books from independent bookstores and other local businesses. But I've just been trying to have, like, the best COVID book tour that I possibly can. Okay, enough of that question. Let's see what else we got here. So what inspired your novel, The Roxy Letters? So I can say that the election of 2016 happened. I think I talked about this little, and it was really unexpected. The results were unexpected for me, and they were pretty devastating. And so once I watched the news, I just couldn't take in anything else sad. So I spent like a whole year only reading funny books, only watching funny television and funny movies. And then in the summer of 2017, Whole Foods, which is, you know, the grocery store where I grew up, the first Whole Foods opened in 1980, 2 blocks from where my mom lived, and my mom and my sister and I would walk there for ice cream. And so Whole Foods kind of grew up as I grew up, but I still sort of thought of it as a local business. And Whole Foods sold to Amazon in the summer of 2017. So I was feeling very nostalgic for a time when Whole Foods was my local indie health food store. And so I think that really also inspired me to write a book that's largely set in the Whole Foods of 2012. Okay, let's see what else we got here in Question Central. Okay, tell us about Austin as a setting for this book. So I am a 4th generation Austinite. I'm not living in Austin right now, but I was born and raised in Austin. I've lived there most of my life. My great grandfather on my mother's side moved there in the 1920s. So my family's been there 100 years. And one thing that I think is so interesting about Austin is that for decades and decades, the favorite pastime of many Austinites is talking about how great Austin used to be. Not how great it is now. It's always like, it's terrible now, but it used to be amazing. And people have told me this since I can remember. So since the early 80s. And what's been interesting for me is to see friends who moved to Austin. Let's say I had a gaggle of friends that moved to Austin in 2002. And then by 2010, they're like, oh, Austin used to be so great. It's terrible now. And I'm sure people that moved to Austin in 2015 are saying that now. And so I wanted to really fully inhabit a character that loves Austin, but also just loves to complain about the changes there. So that was something that was really fun. And I loved highlighting so many amazing local businesses in Austin, like a little bar called Deep Eddy Cabaret, or Book People, where I worked in the 90s, or, you know, Barton Springs Swimming Pool, which is this great naturally spring-fed pool in the middle of town or near downtown. So it was just really fun to write the book almost as a love letter to Austin and a love letter to the kind of funky, artistic indie slackers that I grew up with and that I still sort of think of as my people. Okay, who would you like to play Roxy in the film? From Buzz Belmont. Hi, cousin Buzz. Okay, so right now, excitingly, there are a couple production companies that are kind of sniffing around Roxy as a possible television show, and they both have potential actors attached. So I want to talk about, I don't want to give any of that away, so I'm going to mention an actor that I love that I think would be great for the part, but that has not shown any interest up to this point, and that's Rachel Bloom. And one thing I love about Rachel Bloom is that she is super DIY. So she is most famous now for a show called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. That's a musical that she co-created and stars in. But she got her start from just making her own YouTube videos. So she would write and sing these videos that are really, really funny and put them on YouTube. She would pay for everything, all the production, all the dancers, all the sets. And one that was really funny, I think, is called Fuck Me Ray Bradbury, in which she sort of plays this high school student that has a crush on Ray Bradbury. And one of her videos that she made was seen by the woman who has three names that wrote The Devil Wears Prada. I'm blanking on her name, but she loved Rachel Bloom's work so much that she contacted her and they partnered on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. So Austin is all about like DIY and forming your own band and making art and getting out there yourself, or it always has been to me. And so I think she would be an amazing fit, and she's just a great comedic actor. Okay, so how come I don't have a Texas accent? So I kind of feel like I have one, but maybe I don't. But everyone in my family has one, and my friends here. I'm currently living in Boise. They love for me to like do imitations of my mom's accent. There are several people on this call that have met my mother or know my mother, but she'll call me up and be like, Mare Pauline. You know, let's say if back when I was single, she might call me up and say, Mare Pauline, when you gonna get a man? So I can do a Texas accent, but I don't know how. I've shed it along the way somehow, I guess. I think it does get more intense when I'm talking to my family or chatting with them on the phone or anything. Okay, I'm looking at my next question. Okay, what are some of the things you love about the book? Well, so this book just made me laugh a lot when I was writing it. And so that's what I love about it. I was having a really hard time before I started this book, and writing the letters, they just hit my funny bone and tickle me. And so every day I would ask my husband, like, will you listen to me read what I wrote today? And I would read him the letters and I would just be totally cracking myself up. So I think the thing that I love most about this book is that it like fits my sense of humor, and it makes me chuckle. Like even when I was reading the final page proofs, when I'd read the book like 15 times, it still made me laugh. And so that's what I like most about it. I'd never written anything before that I thought was really funny. And I love humor. I feel like humor is a life raft. It's what gets us through hard things in life. And so I'm just grateful that I got a chance to try to write something that will hopefully cheer people up. Okay. Oh, was there a real Dirty Steve? How did you develop his character? Okay, so, you know, I grew up in Austin. I had many of these kind of I have many of the same jobs that Roxy's had. You know, I worked at Thundercloud Subs. I worked at Barton Springs as a lifeguard. I've worked at a lot of small, quirky, independent businesses in Austin, and I have had an array of eccentric bosses. And Dirty Steve is Roxy's boss at Whole Foods. And he is really inappropriate. And he's like a holdover from an earlier time in Austin. And he doesn't get fired because he's worked at Whole Foods since maybe the 90s, starting out as a bag boy, working his way up. And his employees don't really have the heart to complain about him heartily. So upper management doesn't really know exactly how inappropriate he is, and no one really has the heart to fire him. But Roxy and her friends also, even though they think he's totally kind of awful and inappropriate, they also sort of have a soft spot for him. And they know that once he and his ilk are gone, they'll be replaced by more sort of corporate types. And so they would rather have someone who lets them get away with stuff like stealing food from the deli and coming in late than someone who would be more appropriate but would make them kind of step it up. And be better workers. So I do think that, I have had bosses that had some of Dirty Steve's characteristics. So what was your favorite part of writing the Roxy letters? So Roxy gets involved in a sex cult. I read an excerpt from the beginning of that passage, and I just really had a delightful time writing the scenes that were relating to that sex cult, because the scenes were really outlandish and I think really funny. And I just really got a kick out of, writing group sex cult material that was more funny than dark, if that makes sense. So I would say that was my very favorite thing about writing the book, and the thing that maybe tickled me the most. Okay, so this this question says, just as in the book, Austin has captured the attention of major corporations. What are longtime residents doing to keep Austin weird? So, I go home a lot and my friends are always keeping it weird. So there's a Day of the Dead parade in Austin every year, and it's just this huge celebration of like Mexican American culture, and it's just a beautiful day to celebrate celebrate our dead, to celebrate all that Mexican Americans in Texas contribute. It's just really, really fun. And so I have a friend that always participates in the parade on a large scale. And one year, right before the 2016 election, she had like a Donald Trump piñata and then a skeleton that was like beating it with a stick. And it was really fun because when we went through the streets, I walked with her in the parade, and in English, people would yell like, hit him harder. And everyone who spoke Spanish would yell, más duro, which means like, hit him harder. So even though the parade route was, a mile or more, in two languages, people were like yelling the same thing all the way. And I just thought that was really beautiful. Daniel Johnston, who's a musician who got his start in Austin, he worked at the Burger King near UT at the McDonald's near the University of Texas campus. And he would slip his cassette tapes that he had recorded of himself into people's Happy Meals. And he has a really iconic Hi, How Are You mural on a wall near the UT campus. It's like an alien with these squiggly arms. So he died, or he has squiggly eyes. So he died right before the last Day of the Dead. And my friends did like this huge paper mache squiggly-eyed alien and carried it through the parade to like honor Daniel Johnston. So, people in Austin are still keeping it weird, but keeping it weird, or keep Austin weird, is a slogan developed to encourage people to support local businesses. So I think the best way to keep it weird in Austin is to buy indie, especially right now, and to always think about, what do we want to be still standing when we get to the other side of this. And obviously for me, what I want still standing are those independent businesses. So long answer to a short question. Okay, let's see, what else do we have? Oh, can I do a real Texas accent? I mean, I feel like I tried doing that. I feel like I can do a real Texas accent. I think that's enough of that, y'all. Okay, so I have a question that says, tell us about your mural. So I am delighted to say that there is a mural of the book cover of the Roxy letters in Austin. It's at 7th and Lamar Boulevard, about 1 block north of Book People. And it was commissioned by Simon & Schuster, my publishing company. But I'm thrilled to say that it was painted by my friend Nate Nordstrom. And I've known him since I was in the 4th grade and he was in the 7th grade. And he is a graffiti artist. His graffiti artist name is Slope One, and he paints beautiful graffiti murals all over the world. But sometimes he also does kind of ad work or commissioned work. And so he agreed to paint a mural of the Roxy letters. So that was really something special and wonderful. I got to go to Austin and see the mural, and it was only, weeks before everyone stopped traveling. So I'm just so grateful to Nate for painting it, and that I got to lay eyes on it myself. So it was exciting.
Mary, it's Dan here. I have some questions over on the side I can read to you too that people are leaving in the comments.
Yeah, sure, that would be great.
Okay, there's one from Blair. How did the letter format come to you?
Hi, Blair. Speaking of people I've known all my life, Blair has known Nate at least as long as I have, and I've known Blair since I was born. And Blair works at Terrytown Pharmacy, which is a great local business founded, I believe, by her father that her brother now owns. And they are doing amazing work to support the health of the community. So thank you, Blair. I know that you are probably crazy busy right now because you're not just someone who's giving back, you also have kids. So I know you have a lot going on. Thank you for taking the time to come. Okay, so the letter format came, I was teaching undergrads. I was in a real creative drought. I hadn't written anything I'd liked in a long time. I was very sad about it. But I was teaching at Boise State University, and I had this amazing group of undergraduate students. They were so smart. They were so passionate. I learned so much from them every day that I taught them. And so I would give them in-class writing exercises, and often I would do those exercises with them. And one day I gave them an exercise that was to write a letter from a really quirky character to someone that they were angry with. And so I wrote my letter along with them, and it was my first Roxy letter. It was a letter from Roxy to Everett, and she was complaining because he had barged into her room while she was masturbating with her purple merman vibrator. And I thought it was funny. It really tickled me. And so the next day I wrote another Roxy letter, and the day after that I wrote one more. But the form really spoke to me because I am a huge fan of all 4 of the Bridget Jones novels. And so a comic novel written in letters made sense to me. And I read as many novels written in letters as I could. And I saw and found that there are many really funny books written in letters. So one that my friend Julia Claiborne Johnson, who might be watching, turned me on to is Dear Committee Members by Julie Schumacher. That's written, the narrator is a disgruntled English professor, and the entire novel is written in letters of recommendation from him for his students or fellow faculty members or friends. It's really funny. Where'd You Go, Bernadette, obviously is written in letters or emails and is hilarious. And then one of my all-time favorite comic novels, A Confederacy of Dunces, is not entirely written in letters, but it contains a lot of letters that Ignatius exchanges with his frenemy Myrna Minkoff. So to write a funny book in the epistolary format just made sense to me. And so that's kind of how I came upon that as the format for the book. And I wrote the book when I was a student in an MFA program, and my fellow students had a lot to say about the letter format, and a lot of them just didn't really ever buy into it. But I felt really strongly that while I embraced many of their suggestions that made the book so much better, I didn't embrace the suggestion that I got from some of them to change that format, because I felt intrinsically that the premise of a woman writing letters to her ex-boyfriend who's living with her was just, it just tickled me. So I really stuck by that and was happy with that and how it turned out.
Okay, I have another question from Marianne. This is a good one. Do you remember the first time you felt like you wanted to write stories?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so I was a huge reader ever since I learned to read. I mean, I learned to read in the first grade and immediately just took to it. And my older sister was also a big reader. She's 2.5 years older. And so I would always be reading her books. So I was a little bit advanced as a kid because I, as a younger sibling had access to these books that were a little old for me. But I don't remember thinking I could do this. Like, I remember thinking that authors were like rock stars or unicorns. They weren't real people. Like, I couldn't be a unicorn. And when I was 11, my big sister and I were very obsessed with this Austen writer named Sarah Bird. And we read, at that point, she had 2 novels. Now she has at least 9. And she's still writing amazing novels. But we read her first 2 novels were out over and over. And we talked about her so much that my dad finally asked around and got us an introduction to her. So she invited us over and we went and met her at her house. And that was the first time I thought, oh my gosh, like, writers are actually real people. Like, they have houses and babies and kitchens. And that was just like a mind-blowing thing. So, but I didn't really start writing at all myself until maybe the end of college. And I didn't start writing seriously until I was 24. So I wasn't like, I meet some writers that say, oh, I wrote my first, novel when I was in the 5th grade and it was 12 pages long or whatever. I wasn't doing that. I was primarily just a reader until I was an adult. But I think that's good because I had a good foundation for just sort of intuitively understanding story just from reading so much. So I'm grateful for that.
Okay, and we have a question from Julia. Hi, Julia. This one is, how long did it take you to write this one?
So it took me 8 months to draft the novel, from the first day I started working on it till I had a completed draft. And to me, that's extremely fast for me. And then it sold 3 months later. So I did some revisions on it. I got some revisions from my agent. So from start to sale, it was 11 months, which again is very fast for me. I don't know, knock on wood, I don't know if I'll ever do that again, but it was a really wonderful experience where I didn't want to do anything else when I was awake hardly, except just work on this book because it brought me so much joy. And yeah, again, I hope that happens to me again, where I have some work that comes through me. But I will say that I did start making offerings to Venus at about that time. And Venus is the goddess of love and beauty and friendship and art. And so I felt like she was helping me out. And I also followed advice that I got from Elizabeth Gilbert in her book, Big Magic. She talks a lot about the Greek idea that no humans are geniuses, but we have a creative genius that is like a house elf that lives near us and can visit us and help us when the elf feels like it. And so I like that idea. And she likes it because it keeps people who are artists from being narcissists, because they don't think like I'm a genius. They think, oh, I'm lucky I have a genius that comes and goes away and comes. And she said it can also be helpful if your writing comes out bad, because you can think, well, like my genius didn't show up, so I don't have to blame myself. It just, the genius didn't come. But when I started writing this book, or maybe right before, I started putting out a dish of water every day for my creative genius in saying, creative genius, here you go. Here's water for you. Thank you for your help. And I do think that really did allow me to be open to creativity.
That's awesome. I'm going to start setting out water.
I highly recommend.
She has a follow-up question. How did you hit on the names?
Okay, so Roxy is the main character. I love the name Roxy. It rhymes with Moxie, so I think it just it's a name for someone who is like zesty and has a lot of energy. Like, I could never imagine meeting a Roxy who is like drab or a dud. So Roxy's best friends are named Annie. I don't know how I came upon that name. It just appeared. Dirty Steve just kind of came to me too. I thought it was the perfect name for a really gross, inappropriate boss. Artemis is just such a living embodiment of the goddess, and she's a hunter. She's a hunter of men, and so that was a good fit for her. And her last name is Starla. Again, that just was a match. Roxy's ex-boyfriend is named Brant Bitterbrush. And I wanted a name that just sounded very Texan. And so when I came up with Brant for a first name, I looked at native Texas plants to try to find a last name that would really be a match for him and would really sort of convey his Texas roots. And I also think that alliteration can kind of be funny, and pining over a guy named Brant Bitterbrush is funnier than pining over a guy named like Jake Smith. So those are some of the names and how I came about them.
Okay, we have another question from George. Would Roxy be friends with Bridget, Bernadette, or Ignatius?
Okay, that is a great question. So Bridget is Bridget Jones from Bridget Jones' Diary. Bernadette is Bernadette from Where'd You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple. And Ignatius is Ignatius J. Riley, who is the protagonist of A Confederacy of Dunces. So I don't think that Roxy would be friends with Bernadette. Bernadette is a little bit picky and persnickety, and she and Roxy, I don't think they would pass each other. They wouldn't be in the same social circles. Bernadette is like a little more affluent. You know, she's annoyed that she has to be around yoga moms and like tech wives, and I just don't think that she would come into Roxy's orbit. I think if Roxy and Bridget Jones met each other, they would feel like they were twin souls. They would love each other so much it hurts. I feel like Bridget Jones would be, at this point, Roxy's like wise aunt, wise but zany aunt. And Ignatius J. Riley did not come out of his room much, let's be honest. So if Roxy was visiting New Orleans and she went to the French Quarter and she ran into Ignatius, like pushing around his weenie wagon, selling hot dogs and wearing a pirate outfit, I think she would be like, I gotta go talk to that guy. And they would probably have some sort of altercation, but I can't imagine that they would ever actually be friends. It's a great question. Thank you, George.
And we have another one from Marianne. Do you remember your first story?
Oh, do I remember my first story? Oh, yes. Oh, this is like kind of bad. This is sort of a bad story. I don't ever tell this story, but I will. So this isn't my first story, but this is the first story I sort of remember getting feedback on. You know, feedback is so painful. But I wrote this story. I wanted to go to graduate school. This was like in 1997 or 1998 maybe. And I wrote this story, and through a family connection, someone in my family knew this screenwriter in Austin who has passed away. His name's Bill Whitliff. He's a legendary screenwriter, an amazing man, and really an honest man. And he read my story, and I was hoping he would like offer to write me a recommendation for grad school. And he called me up, and I was hit with the flu. This was like the last time I've had the flu in my whole life. I had like 103 fever. I was feeling very bad. And he was just like, you know, you're writing, the story's fragmented. It has no content. I think you just need to think hard about like why you want to be a writer. Like being a writer is hard, and you have to get up every day and you have to confront a blank page, and you never know if you'll ever be able to write anything good again. And it's just difficult. And so I just really want you to think about why you want that. And I just remember, you know, that was before I knew how to take constructive criticism, and I was just really like gutted. But I, now looking back on it, kind of admire his bravery in being so direct with me, because, you know, the story probably was fragmented and didn't have a lot of content. But I also think that like the sooner as a writer you can learn to shield yourself and learn to shield your inner artist child from criticism, the better. And so in a way it was good that I, you know, had to start learning that at an early age and learning to kind of believe in myself and my desire to be a writer, whether or not people outside believed in that. Yeah.
And we have another question. What are some of the ways you approach revision?
Okay, ways I approach revision. So with the Roxy letters, I was writing it when I was in an MFA program. So I would write chapters and I would submit them, and then I would get feedback from my 11 fellow students and teacher, or maybe 8 fellow students and teacher. And so that actually was super helpful because I was getting really amazing constructive feedback all the way through in the process. And then when I was done, I got edits from my agent and did those. And then once the book sold to Simon & Schuster, my brilliant editor there gave me amazing notes where I overhauled it. So I think all that to say, writing really is a collaborative process. And for most writers, you have to get feedback from other people along the way. Now, not all writers. So Dennis Johnson was one of my dear friends and mentors. And if he got notes from an editor, he would just write stet, which means like, let it stand. I will not make these revisions on the top of an entire manuscript and send it back. And he would tell them, you can publish it as I wrote it, or I will pull the book. But that is unusual. You know, he was a genius. And many of us are just hard workers. And those of us who are hard workers, you know, hopefully with a spark of talent, need some guidance and editorial guidance.
And we have another question from Julia. How do you deal with solitude, or do all of the voices in your head keep you company?
Well, right now, I am living a much more solitary life than I was a few weeks ago, as we all are. I am lucky to be sheltering in place with my husband, who is delightful company. But I still am experiencing, you know, more solitude than I would. And as a writer, honestly, let me revise that, because I spent more time alone before we were sheltering in place because my husband would go to work all day and I would work from home. And I like spending a lot of time by myself, and I have all my life kept company with characters from other people's books. And now I get to keep company sometimes with characters in the books that I'm writing. So yeah, I would definitely say that fiction is the way that is like a workaround for loneliness. So it feels like solitude instead of loneliness.
And we have another question. Dennis Johnson taught at Boise?
Yes. So I will say this bookshelf right here is a stack of books that I inherited from him when he died. So these are some of my most prized possessions. I first met Dennis when I was in a master's program at the University of Texas, and that was the spring of 2002. And he and his wife, Cindy Lee, would have me up to their house. They had some land in northern Idaho, and they would have like a week-long kind of summer camp up there. And so they would have me up for a week in the summers to spend time with them and their nieces and a few other friends. Then Dennis also taught at Boise State University. This was the last school that he taught at before he died. And he taught here, I think it was the fall of 2015. And I think he's the reason that I ended up here, because I emailed him and I said, you know, I'm applying to grad schools. Like, what do you think about Boise? And he wrote back. And, you know, Dennis has lived in Austin off and on, or he had. And for him, Austin had gotten too big. And he wrote back and said, you know, Boise's at that perfect time. It's hip, it's cheap, it's easy to get around. And if they offer you money, you need to get out here before it's spoiled like every other great place. And so when I did get accepted, I, you know, followed his advice, and here I am.
Okay, and we have one more question on the list right now. What did you learn from the editor at Simon & Schuster that was maybe something that you had never had before?
Okay, so, I mean, her name is Christine Pride. she bought the book, and then she left Simon & Schuster because she got a 2-book deal herself, which is so exciting. I mean, she's just a total boss. And one thing that she helped me with, so she helped me understand character motivation in every single scene. And she helped me understand moments when characters are sort of pivoting in their mood or belief on what's going on. But specifically with the Roxy letter, she helped me with the beginning, because when I wrote the book, it started on what is now chapter 1. And she asked me to write a whole prologue. And I was very resistant to doing that. In fact, when I got the notes, I was weeping because I thought, oh, I'll never be able to figure this out, and this might ruin the book. And then when I did what she was asking, which was to write a letter from Roxy to Everett right after he's moved in, explaining, you know, what the rules are, the ground rules are for their relationship and for his time at her house. When I did that, the whole book just worked so much better. And I don't understand her talent. Like, I don't have that kind of editorial talent. I give a lot of notes on friends' books, and I just don't have her abilities and mojo. And I'm really in awe of it, and in awe of anyone who's a good editor. It's such an amazing skill. And, you know, sometimes I can give okay notes, but I don't have that just magic where I can bump a book up, you know, several tiers just by giving some notes, if that makes sense.
Okay, and what are some of the most valuable things that you have learned about writing?
Most valuable things I've learned about writing. Okay, so there's the saying that, like, the muse has to know where to find you. And I completely believe that. And I'm a little worried because the muse doesn't know where to find me right now, because I'm just doing book promotion all day and I'm not doing a lot of writing. But for most of the last 20 years, I have a fairly set writing schedule that it changes depending on whether or not I have to work full time. But even so I'd say I was writing obsessively for probably 13 years with a full-time job. And I would have a set routine where I would wake up early before work and write, you know, some years I could write an hour, some years I could write 3 hours, just depending on what else was going on. But for me, it is of paramount importance to have a writing routine so that the muse or the creative genius knows where you are. And I think it just trains the brain to drop into that sort of unconscious creative mode. And for me, if I would just try to sit down when I felt like I didn't get the same kind of amount or quality of work as when I had a dedicated time. I also think, of course, it's very important to read. And that's, you know, something that I've done all my life. I also have to say, it's interesting to me with my mentors. Some of my writer mentors watch a lot of television. Dennis Johnson watched tons of TV, and he watched crap TV. Like, I mean, not crap, but he would watch, like, not highbrow TV. He would watch Trailer Park Boys or The Flight of the Conchords, like stuff that was really lighthearted. He loved Freaks and Geeks. Like, he would weep watching Freaks and Geeks. So moved by it. So I shouldn't call any of that crap TV. It's all high quality TV, but it's lighthearted. But then another friend and mentor of mine, Joy Williams, doesn't watch TV ever, and she just reads like a book every single day. I don't know how she does it, but she's just voracious. But I do think that input is really important, whether that be books, television, film, fine arts. It's just theater. It's just really important to be putting art in. And there is an Austin writer named Austin Kleon who wrote a book called Steal Like an Artist. He has a great website, and he sends out a newsletter every week, and he writes about ways that he's maintaining his creativity and also what he's reading and watching. And he's a real inspiration for me and a real reminder that, like, it's so important to constantly be putting art in so that art can come out.
That's excellent. I'm going to come back up on screen if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, please.
So I think that's all of the questions that we have. I want to thank you for being here and doing this with us. Where do you go from here?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm just grateful to be here. So I definitely have another few weeks of book promotion kind of lined up. And then I'm hoping that as that then ramps down, I will start ramping my writing back up. So yeah, hopefully that'll all sort of unfold naturally, but that's my plan for today.
And can you share anything fun that you're reading in quarantine? I love that we have both recently read the same book during
Um,
lockdown. I'm just
yeah,
wondering
can I
where
say
you.
what
Yeah,
Can I
sure.
share what that book is? Okay, so Dan and I were talking before, and we both admitted that we had never read A Handmaid's Tale, and we both read it recently. And so that, Margaret Atwood has long been a favorite, and yet I hadn't read that book. Honestly, I always thought like, oh, it's too rapey. Like, I'll wait. I'm just not up for it right now. And then when I read it, it was so brilliant and hard hitting and yet sort of manageable in that way. So that was great. Right now I'm reading Una Out of Order, which is really kind of delightful and fun about a woman who is living her life not sequentially, but jumping around from year to year. So she'll wake up one year in her 51-year-old body and then the next year in her 27-year-old body.
Oh, wow.
So that's really fun. And it's kind of a light-hearted read. And then I'm looking for my copy of The Knockout Queen by Rufi Thorpe.
Mm-hmm.
Rufi lives in El Segundo in LA, and that's a Book of the Month Club pick, and it is just unbelievably brilliant. So I highly, highly recommend The Knockout Queen to anyone who's looking for something that is funny, but also very, very powerful.
Yeah. She's another author too that had, the book is scheduled, it's ready to go out into the world, and then the world just sort of spins off its axis all of a sudden. But we're
Yeah,
making the
and
best of
she's
it.
a friend of mine too, and she's been a great resource because we've been kind of shifting gears to make a lot of video and doing a lot of promotion online. And so we bounce ideas off of each other. And it's been really, really helpful to have another friend. She has a really positive attitude about putting out a book right now, and that's infectious. And so I'm just so grateful to her and would highly recommend her book to anyone because it is just brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for doing this with us. Thank you for rolling with the punches. And we had originally scheduled, many of you probably know, we had scheduled Mary in the store, and then we had to move it this way to the next best thing. But it was a real pleasure. I'm glad we were still able to do the event. And I want to just remind people that Mary's book is available for purchase. Your purchase keeps me employed, keeps Book Soup's doors open. And you can do that by clicking on the green tab directly in the center bottom of the screen. And please check out our website. We're going to be doing more live streams in the next coming months. Mary, I want to wish you luck on the rest of your book tour, and thank you so much for doing this with us. And I hope we can see you again in person soon.
I hope so too. Thank you so much, Dan. I'm really grateful to you. And thank you so much for everyone who came to watch. I'm so, so appreciative.
And if you joined late and you want to catch the entire live stream, we'll post it in our archive immediately after the program, and we'll post it on our social media as well. Thank you all for being here. Please stay safe, and we will see you all again soon.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.